Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Thabiso, and in this talk, I'll be going over how you can go about creating an online store using the JAMSTACK. Now, the reason I decided to create an entire talk about creating an online store is because, well, I've tried and failed many times to create an online store, and I'm just so proud of myself to have gotten to a point where I feel like I know what I'm doing. So part of this talk is just me showing off about my awesome online store building skills, and then the other part of it is me going over how I did it, so that if someone else is interested, maybe they could learn a thing or two. So I'll begin with the showing off part first. Let me just hop over to my awesome site, and this is it. Behold, my awesome site. I'm gonna talk about the site in terms of the user's experience, like the things that it offers the user, as well as the merchant's experience, because there's certain features that are for the person who owns the store as well. In terms of the user, this is where the user lands. So the landing page is basically the product page. So when the user gets to the store, they can just browse and browse and browse and see all of the products right on the product page. So when a user is ready to purchase something, they can click Add to Cart. When they do that, the cart summary opens up immediately. And then what happens is that they can then check out from here, or they can go back to the store and just continue browsing. They can also view the cart summary right here from the nav bar. So you can see that it updates with all of the prices. And they can also update the cart summary right from the cart summary. They can also update the orders. So if you can see here, I will add one of these, and then everything updates. So it's pretty stateful in that manner. And yeah, those are kind of the features from the landing page. Then when the user is ready to check out, they can just click checkout, and then that opens the checkout page. Now from the checkout page, the user still has the ability to edit the order. Then they can just press edit, it'll open the cart summary, and then they can still do the same editing functionality and go back to the checkout page. Once then the user is of course ready to make the purchase, they can then fill in their billing information, fill in their shipping information, and then fill in their credit card information. So I'm going to use a demo card here just to demonstrate how the checkout process happens. So the part that I think most proud of about the site is the checkout process, because if you look here, it's not redirecting the users to a different page. So the checkout is being handled all on the same site. And I think as someone who's a bit finicky about user experience, I always find it weird when I'm trying to purchase something, then it sends me to another site, and then that site looks different, then I come back to this site, and then it's just weird. So I made it a point to make sure that everything is API based, then the payment is successfully completed from here. Now, once the user's payment is completed, another feature that the site has is that it will send them an email, something like this, and then showing them that the order has been captured and everything is going well. So in terms of the user experience, I think that's as far as the user can go. They can, of course, go back and browse and buy more stuff. At that point, though, it's handed over to the merchant, right? So the merchant has a dashboard. Let me just find the merchant's dashboard. So this is the merchant's dashboard. So from this dashboard, they can control the products that they can sell. They can control the prices. They can add stuff like discounts or anything like that. They can also track their orders. Now you can see that this is the orders dashboard. So all of the orders that have come in, they can see them here, and they can see the status of those orders. Have they been paid off? Are they still in arrears or anything like that? The other feature that then the merchant has is that they also get an email. So when an order comes in, the user gets an email, then the merchant gets an email that they have a new order, so that they can go and check out and fulfill the order. Yeah, that's as far as the merchant stuff part of it goes. And this concludes the demo of my awesome site. So I'll go back to the slides now and talk about how I did it. And before I talk about exactly how I did it, I'd like to first go over how I didn't do it, because I've been through some weird avenues that have left me very frustrated, and it's just worth it to mention them just in case you are also trying to move in that direction. Now, if you Google how to create an online store today, the first kind of results that you'll get are things like the no-code solutions. So what a no-code solution is it's basically like a template or maybe a website builder or something. So you'll just drag and drop a whole bunch of things and put a store together, and you won't have to write any code. So that's where the name no-code solutions come from. And no-code solutions are awesome, don't get me wrong. You can actually build a site very quickly with a no-code solution. Just this, if you look at this site, I use Spotify to build a site in under 30 minutes. And it has all of the bells and whistles that you might expect from an online store. This is the landing page. You have a nice selections page here. You even have a product page. And what I liked the most about Spotify is that the site itself is fully responsive. So in about 30 minutes, you can go from not having a store to having a fully responsive store that actually works, you know. But as I was testing this, I was very excited building it. And as I decided to test it, I'm like, okay, let me purchase something. I was greeted with this page, which tells me that I need to pick a plan before I can check out. And I'm like, whoa, I wasn't told about this. I was told it was free. So I was like, okay, let me check how much it is. And the cheapest one on basic Spotify is $29 a month, 29 US dollars. I Googled that, and that is $450 a month before I finish my site. And I was like, no, I draw my line at that. My stingy nature does not allow me to pay $400 for a site that I haven't even finished building. So, well, there were others that claimed to be free and not like Spotify, so something like Equid e-commerce, I tried that as well. And they seem to have the same kind of thing that Spotify has, in that they have some very important features that are hidden behind some kind of subscription. And to me, that quickly became very frustrating, and I just decided to say no to these no-code solutions. I need to find a better way. And the next, sort of on the other extreme of a no-code solution is a bespoke solution. So in the bespoke solution, you become an architect, really. You're gonna create the database schemas, you're gonna create the APIs, gonna write everything. Every single thing that your site does is gonna be written by you. And just a bit of background about myself, I don't really like writing stuff in the back end. I like it. I like it when the backend is already written for me. So whenever I think of creating a site and then I have to create APIs and write backends and all of that, my mood just goes sour, and I end up not writing it. So as much as the bespoke solutions are cool and all, and they don't really give you these hidden costs, it's still a lot of code to write, and I just decided no to those as well. So a middle ground between the bespoke solutions and the no-code solutions is what we would call low-code solutions. So now with the low-code solutions, you write some of the code and then you delegate some of the code to a particular vendor. And that sounded kind of like what I wanted to do, because I want control over the front end, but at the same time, I don't want to write the back end. So low-code solutions were like my saving grace. Until I realized that a lot of the low-code solutions that exist today don't process payments in South Africa. Like Snipcart, for example, I'd built a whole site only to realize as I was checking out that they don't process payments in South Africa. That was very frustrating. But it did give me the idea for the demo. So the demo that I show you now is actually a demo that is inspired by Snipcart. So I ended up getting to a point where I was like, no to the low-code solutions as well, because it's just this hidden agenda where some of them don't process payments in South Africa. I needed something a little bit more solid. So what did I use then if I didn't use the no-code, the low-code, or the bespoke solutions? And that is the kind of darling of this talk, which is the JAMSTACK. The JAMSTACK is kind of like a low-code solution, but it's different in the sense that in how much of the site that I delegate. The reason I decided to use the JAMSTACK, honestly, is because when I Googled it, there was a promise that I would build the entire site for free, and I like free things. So JAMSTACK's my guy. Before we get into the site and everything, I'd like to first talk about what is the JAMSTACK. Now, whenever people ask what the JAMSTACK is, we can sort of go about answering what the JAMSTACK is in two ways. We can talk about what the JAMSTACK stands for, and as well as what the JAMSTACK means. I'll talk about what the JAMSTACK stands for first. The JAMSTACK stands for JavaScript APIs and Markup Stack. So the J is for JavaScript, A is for APIs, M for markup, and then stack. And with stack, we're talking about a group of technologies that work together to deliver the product. Now, in terms of what the JAMSTACK stands for, the JAMSTACK stands for, well, there's a lot of explanations on the internet that you'll find about what the JAMSTACK stands for. There's some of them complicated, and the one that resonated the most for me was when I was doing a free coding camp YouTube tutorial, and a guy called Phil Hawksworth defined the JAMSTACK as these fast and secure sites and apps delivered by pre-rendering files and serving them directly from a CDN, removing the need to manage or run web servers. Now, what that basically means is that your entire website is a static site, right? You pre-render the entire site, ship it onto a CDN, and then that is how you deliver the site. Now that removes the need to kind of manage your own web servers or anything like that, because the site is being served directly from a content delivery network. Now, in order to just understand how profound that is, I think I always find it important to go through a bit of the history of the web. Now, the web started out as this simple kind of architecture where we have a browser and a server. The server has all of the static content, the website there, and then the browser would then ask for the web pages, and then the web pages would then be returned to the browser. So it was just this simple two-tier architecture where you have a browser asking for stuff and a server giving stuff back. Now, as websites became a lot more complicated, we started to need to add a bit more logic. Like if we're building an online store, so to speak, you do need a bit of logic in the back end, because you can't determine ahead of time what the user will be wanting. So we started to add things to the web servers, and then it became a process of asking for stuff, then doing a little bit of processing, and then sending it back. Now, as the web got more and more famous and the load started to increase, we started to add a little bit more infrastructure where we would abstract away the data layer into its own database server, and then we'd have a dedicated server just to build the sites and serve the content. And then what that necessitated as well, if you have multiple servers, is things like load balancers, which would determine which server the content is being served from. Additionally, we got to a point where we were like, okay, we have all of this dynamic content, but we can still keep some of it static. So then we would host some of it from a CDN, and then some of it would come from the web servers, and the data would come from the database. And I think, in short, it became very complicated, especially for someone like me who doesn't really care about anything beyond the browser. So if I want to create an online store today, I'd have to be thinking about the databases, I'd have to be thinking about the web servers, I'd have to be thinking about security, I'd have to be thinking about load balancing and scaling and all of that. And those are kind of the challenges that I went through when I was just thinking about creating an online store. And it honestly just crippled me, and a lot of the times I'd end up not doing it. So with the JAMSTACK, the idea here is to bring us back to the simpler kind of architecture where we have a static site, and then the site is being delivered to the browser from a content delivery network. And that comes with a lot of advantages. Now, you might be wondering, if I'm saying that that's like how the web began, it's like I'm taking us backwards in time, but it's really not taking us backwards in time, because the web has evolved a lot since back in the day when we used to use those old browsers and those old servers. Now, some of the ways that the web has evolved that have enabled us to go back to simpler architectures are things like static site generators. So a static site generator will allow you to write a lot of markup very quickly and automate a lot of the writing of the markup. Things like tooling, you have versioning now, we have deployments have become very easy. The browsers themselves have become very, very capable. So you can run an entire application in a browser. It's no longer just about requesting pages. But I think the advancements that has enabled this kind of architecture the most is the growth in the API economy. So the API economy has grown in such a way that a lot of companies have seen the opportunity to abstract away some of the commonalities that you'll find in a website, and then just give us access to it via an API. Now that's what allows us to build static sites that are not really static because they still communicate with those APIs, but it's just that we don't have to write it. And as a front-end web developer, I love that. It's awesome. Now, there's a lot of stacks. I keep talking about the JAMSTACK, and there's a lot of stacks out there that exist. And in order to understand the JAMSTACK as well, just a bit better, I'll pick on one of the stacks, the LAMP stack, which is one of the more famous stacks that we know. So a stack, is, like I said, is basically about the group of technologies that are used to deliver a product. And in the LAMP stack, the LAMP stack would stand for Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP stack. So the Linux would be your operating system, and then MySQL would be your data access layer. The processing will be done by PHP, and then the the routing, the HTTP routing, will be done by Apache. And then all of that would live in a server, and if you wanted to scale up, you'd have to have multiple of these servers that duplicate the same kind of architecture. Now with the JAMSTACK, you basically still have a lot of these layers, it's just that they've been shifted around. Like in terms of the operating system, your operating system is now your browser, in your browser. So it's not really an operating system, it's a runtime. And that is where you run your JavaScript, and that's where your logic lives. And then you also have your routing, which is then moved to a content delivery network. And then the API layer is not, like the data layer is not even in your domain anymore. So that's the part that you abstract away and use APIs to get access to the different data that your site needs to be dynamic. Now, if you look at how then the JAMSTACK is structured, it does then get us back to this interesting point where we have the simple two-tier architecture where you have a CDN that hosts all of the content, and then it just adds a data layer where the data layer comes from the different APIs that you interact with. So setting up a website in this manner comes with a lot of advantages, and a lot more of those advantages are for front-end developers like me who want to deliver a complete product without having to worry about the parts of it that we don't really want to, or maybe we don't even have the expertise to develop. So JAMSTACK allows you to write websites very quickly. So like I said, I built this entire site in about a week, which is crazy. It's a week and about 500 lines of code. But it's a fully functioning website that an entire business can run from. So what the JAMSTACK allows you to do then is to build fully functional products very quickly. Because, well, like I said, it's very simple, the architecture. You're not writing the backends and all of that. And then the interesting side effect of that is that it allows you to not worry about security. So as a front-end engineer, if I was to be the same person that is writing the databases and all of that, I have to worry about other things that come with writing a back-end, which is security and stuff like that. But with the JAMSTACK, that becomes out of my domain. So I don't have to worry about back-end securities and all of that stuff. All I do is write the front end and focus on that. It then also makes the website very scalable. I used to worry a lot as well, like once I start to build an online store, what happens when my user comes to me, like the merchant comes to me and be like, dude, like my users are increasing, I need to scale. I don't know how to scale, I'm not a back-end engineer, so I need to have someone else do that. But with the JAMSTACK, I don't have to worry about that. It's not in my domain because the content delivery network is built for scalability. Now, I can build a website confidently knowing that it will scale, even without the knowledge of how things scale. It also saves me a lot of money. Like another reason why I would not build these websites is because after realizing how much work I have to do, the motivation needs to be a lot of money in order for me to build it. I'd end up charging people a lot of money, and then they would end up not building it, right? Now, since I'm not really writing a lot of code, since I'm not really working hard with this kind of approach, I can charge less, and that allows me to then build a lot more sites and serve a lot more people. The overall kind of advantage, I would say though, of the JAMSTACK is that it just allows me to develop in a much more happy mood. I don't have to deal with code that I don't really want to write. I can focus on the things that I really like as a front-end developer and still have a product that works going out there into the world. So in terms of the site that we're discussing here, the stack that I kind of used is that on the APIs and markup stuff, I used just pure vanilla HTML and CSS for the markup, and then I used Commerce.js and Yoko for the APIs. So Commerce.js takes care of the emailing part, it takes care of the cart systems, it takes care of the product listings as well. And then I used Yoko to process the payments. Now that's what allows, so Yoko has an API first kind of payment process. That's what allows me to process the payment and still remain in the site. Yeah, the content delivery network that I used was Netlify. So I've been playing up the JAMSTACK a lot in this talk. It seems like I'm saying that the JAMSTACK is this all-powerful thing that can take care of everything. You know, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying throw away all of your servers. The JAMSTACK works very, very well with other existing technologies because it is just calling APIs. You can call an API from someone else, or you can call your own APIs. And sometimes you need to call your own APIs. You need a dedicated server for some things. For example, in the case of this website, you can't really process a payment securely without having a dedicated server. So you would need, so the way that the payments work is that you have to send a private key from your dedicated server to Yoko in order for them to process the payment securely. Now at this point, you can use a dedicated server if you have to, or you can start to take advantage of modern advancement in servers, such things like serverless functions, which is what I did here. So you don't need to have like an entire dedicated server just to process payments. You can use a serverless function and only pay for the payment part of it, since that's probably not going to be the bulk of what your site does. And this is just a demonstration of how that works. You then send Yoko a public key, they encrypt it, and then you have to send them your private key for them to decrypt it and make sure that nothing was tampered with in your website. Another part that you need a dedicated server with in your site here is with the confirmation as well of the payment, right? Commerce.js doesn't allow you to just confirm that a payment has been made. You actually have to have a private key that you send through via your own server and then mark an order as paid. I used a Netlify serverless function as well to do this. I didn't actually have to run a dedicated server. So I've been talking a lot about this website and you've seen the demo. I'm sure you're wondering what the code is looking like now. I'm gonna switch over to the code base now. And this is the code base. So like I said, the structure is very simple with this code base. It's just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. What I did though is that I didn't use HTML purely. I tried to, and then it got very long and very complicated. So I ended up using pug templates to separate out the HTML. So you'll see that these are .pugs and not .html. I did the same thing with the CSS as well. I couldn't just, it got very complicated to have one style sheet. So I had to use Sass to separate out. So so you'll see that these are many files that I just combine into one Sass. So that's another advantage of using this approach. You can then take advantage of the tooling that exists in order to just make your development life easier. The JavaScript part of it, I use JavaScript modules to separate out a lot of the JavaScript and also interface with the different APIs. What you will see with the JavaScript modules is that I have a whole module that deals with interfacing with Commerce.js. So a lot of the functionality that you saw in terms of the cart systems, the products that we saw on the page, the orders that were sent out, the emails, all of that comes from just these APIs. It's not code that I wrote myself, but it's functionality that is very critical to the operations of the website. The checkout page is perhaps the more complicated part of it. Now, I mentioned that I had a prerequisite that I don't want to, I didn't really want to redirect to a different site when I'm processing the payment. And that's where the little bit of complication comes from with the site. So I'll go over the steps now as to how I managed to process an entire payment and still stay within the site. And it does have a little bit of its pitfalls. It could be better, but it works. Now, the first step that I go through with that is that I then have to send a token to Yoko with the card information. So remember when I put those card information and the price and all of that, send that with a public key to Yoko so that they can encrypt it in whatever way. And then what they do is that they send me back a token. Now, the second step there is that I then need to use my own dedicated server in order and send them my private key so that they can decrypt that and make sure that nothing was tampered with. From that moment on, Yoko then processes the payment with the whole 3D secure and everything. You didn't see that now because I was using a demo card, but in production they actually use 3D secure and make sure that everything's secure and then process the payment. Once the payment is processed, then the money at that moment is in the merchant's account. But the merchant doesn't know anything about the order at that point. So then we need to communicate with Commerce.js to tell them that an order has happened, and then it can send out the emails and everything. Now we do that with the third step, where I then call the Commerce.js API to create an order. Now once that order is created, I still need to mark that order as paid to let the merchant know that the payment was actually successful. So that is done with my fourth step, where I then communicate with my own backend server that the order has been fulfilled. I send through my public key, not my public key, my private key to Commerce.js, and then they mark the order as successful. And then once the order has been marked as successful, it returns to the front end, and that's where the message that the payment has been completed successfully is displayed. Now, the vulnerability that this kind of structure has is that after step 2, the money is in the merchant's account, but the merchant doesn't know anything about an order. So if anything breaks, the server dies, maybe the user's phone, the internet dies or anything like that, if anything breaks at that moment, the user has paid money, but the merchant knows nothing about an order, so the merchant has the money. I actually had it the other way around at first. I'd create the order and everything would be done, and then I'd have the user pay afterwards. But then it still suffers the same vulnerability that there could be an order that exists with no money in the merchant's account. So it's something that you'd have to play around with if you wanted to use it in this way. You'd have to just see what works best. Yeah. But yeah, man, that's just the code base as well in a nutshell. And that concludes the code base for the site. So just some final remarks. If you thinking about building an online store and you're the type of person like me who doesn't really want to be writing all of the code on the back end, and you want to create the site quickly and all of that, consider using the JAMSTACK. You can end up with a development process that is very quick, a site that is really secure, because as front-end engineers, we don't always know about this back-end security stuff, but you can get the benefits of that. You can end up with a site that is scalable without you as a developer having to have any input in that scaling. You can save a lot of money, charge less money to your customers, and all around just be much happier and enjoy the process of developing an online store much, much more. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you enjoy the rest of the talks.